Hi, this is the help video for Access Chapter 6, Problem Solve 1. We're picking up at step number 7. In this query, we are going to use the inventory table to figure out what books in the fiction and literary genre were written in the 19th century, right? So between 1800 and 1899. So we're going to have a composite criteria in the years published, because we want to look between 1800 and 1899. And so looking at that, I want to use the between. So between 1800 and 1899, because remember, that's inclusive. And then we also want to look at fiction or literary. And this is one of the things that people get confused on. The way that we write this in English is not how we're going to do it logically. It says which books in fiction and literary genres. So really this is an or. If it's fiction or if it's literary and it's between 1800 and 1899, then we want it, right? So you really have to interpret and not use this literal and there. So let's go ahead and create this query in design view and get going here. So all we need is table inventory. And from table inventory, we want, what do we want? We want book title, author ID, year published, book genre, and condition. Okay, so pretty simple query so far. If I run it, I get everything, right? But I understand that I only want these that are between 1800 and 1899. So I can see some here that are outside of that. And then I want this book genre to be either literary or, what's the other one? Fiction. Okay, so right now I'm showing all 15, but I know that's not what I really want. So let's go back and start building that. So in the book, years published, I'm going to go to the criteria row and I'm going to zoom. And between is really probably the easiest to use. So between 1800 and 1899, and remember, between is inclusive, so that means 1800 and 1899 are part of the true. So the way this is read, it's like you're looking at if the year published is greater or equal to 1800 and the year published is less than or equal to 1899. That's what we're going to do. So I'm going to do OK, and I'm going to run it and see. I'm going to just do a quick check, and look, they're all in the 19th century. So that's working good. I'm going to go back and look at book genre. So in this one, I could use a couple different things. I could do this or that, but I'm going to do in. So in, remember, is like doing multiple ors. In fiction, comma, literary. So that's like saying if the book genre equals fiction or the book genre equals literary. And I could continue, I could just do comma, next one, comma, next one. I think in class I said, if you wanted Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Indiana, you could do in OH, comma, PA, comma, WV, comma, IN, right? And it's like saying Ohio or Pennsylvania or West Virginia or Indiana. So it's a little shorthand. So now I'm going to run it and let's check. So we still have just the 1800s and it's limited to fiction and literary. We're down to 7 records that match that. And I want you to recognize that those two conditions are on the same row. So it's an and between there. It has to be within that date range and it has to be one of those book genres, right? Because I placed them on the same row, both of those conditions have to be met in a record for that record to display in the result set. Okay, so we're going to save this and it's going to be called QRY 19th century. And that's it for that one. I don't think we're sorting or anything. So that one was pretty good, right? So let's go ahead and close that one out. And we're going to go to step number 8. Okay, so query number 8. Oh, I forgot to mark 7 is done. Get that one done. Okay, so query 8 is we want to look at a list of books or transactions that have occurred within a certain date range and that contain your office in the title of the book. So we're going to break this down because it's pretty complex, the two things. So we're going to just do one piece and then we'll make sure that works, and then we'll go on and do the second piece. So we're going to do this parameter using the between function for a specific period of time. So we're going to begin this query in design view by using inventory, transaction, and transaction details. And I always like to do this. I'm like Ghostbusters. I don't want to cross those streams. So let's do this. Okay. So we can start off by just building our query, bringing our fields down, and then we can start doing the criteria. So customer ID, sorry, out of time, book title, transaction date, and quantity. So if I run that, I get all of them. And what I like to do here when they're looking at your office, so one of the things is look how it begins with your office, right? So keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, so we want to use a parameter. And remember, a parameter query is just down here in the criteria. Use the square brackets to put a prompt. And we're going to combine that with the between, which is that inclusive start and end point. So I'm going to go to transaction date in the criteria field and right click and zoom. And I'm just going to start with between. And normally I'd put a range here, like I'd actually type in a date, right? But when we're doing a parameter query, instead of actually hard coding in a value, we're going to put a prompt. And it says enter start date. They give you what you want to put there. Enter start date, square bracket, and enter end date, square bracket. So anywhere I would have normally just put a beginning and an end date, I can change that to this parameter. Makes this query so much more flexible because I can run it on any date range. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to test it. And so they give us some tests here. So there's my parameter. So 7/1/2020 and 9/30/2020. And I got nothing. Hold on. Okay, so this date range they gave me, I'm not going to get anything. Look, I took that out and went back and looked at and the transaction dates are all in 2018. So I'm going to go back to the grid. I'm going to put this back in here. I'm going to run it again, but this time I'm going to do 7/1/2018 and 9/30/2018. There we go. So I'm not going to get anything because there wasn't anything sold in that date range. When I changed the year to 2018, it worked for my file. Okay, so we know that works. We can see it's within that date range, but I'm getting other things besides your office. So I'm going to go back and, you know what, I'm going to save this so I don't lose this. QRY 90 days. And now the next wildcard in the like function to assure only books with your office. So in the book title, in the criteria row, I'm going to zoom and I'm going to type like, quote, your office, asterisk, quote. Because what I'm saying is it has to begin with your office, and I don't care what the ending of it is, right? So if I click on that and I run, I got to put those date ranges in again. This time I'm going to do the 2018. And I get the records that were sold in that date range that begin with your office. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I don't think there's any kind of sort, so I do think we're done with that one. But that's a good lesson there. When I ran it and I didn't get anything, and I was pretty sure I was right, so I just went back and actually looked at the underlying data. And probably I would have been better to make a note of that before we started putting the conditions in. So we're going to go ahead and be done with 8. We have one more, and that's query 9. Okay, the scenario for step number 9 is we want to build a query that prints out when something should be shipped. So we have kind of a business rule that something needs to be shipped within 7 days of the purchase date, the transaction date. So we're going to use the table transaction and come up with a calculated field ship by date based on the transaction date. And it's going to be within 7 days. So we want to use the date add function because we're going to take the transaction date, add 7 days, and put out the day that it should be shipped by. Okay? So let's go ahead and create in Query Design. All we want is table transaction. That's got everything we need. So we want transaction ID, customer ID, transaction date, and shipped. So pretty much everything. Then we're going to create a new calculated field. And that calculated field is going to be called ship by date, colon. So the thing you need to know here is what function you're going to use. Well, they told you it's date add. And if you think about it, you want to take a date and add 7 to it to get what that end date is. So date add would make sense. Then we have to decide what interval we're using. And we want the date, right? So remember I told you to paperclip that little page that had all that, those interval codes. So we would find a D. And then the next piece of this function is how many days do we want to add? So we want to add 7 days. And then what are we adding it to? Well, we're adding it to transaction date. And that's it. We're saying, hey, we're talking about days here, not weeks or years or months. We're going to take 7 and add it to transaction date and get our ship by date. Do that. We are going to sort this ascending by ship date. Let's run it. So here's the transaction date. Here's the date it needs to be shipped by. And it worked. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. QRY ship by date. And let's make sure I have everything. Calculates the date that should be date, ascending, and we're good. So we're done with this assignment. You can go ahead and submit this problem solve 1 for chapter 6. Thank you.